So this is a podcast for KMSS. You like that? We call ourselves KMSS. That's
Love
very
it.
creative because we're on the West Coast and we like to pretend we're a radio show. I have Wayne Hagstrom as my wingman. Wayne, we always want to ask you what you do because nobody really knows. What do you do, Wayne?
I primarily focus on business process improvement and leadership development.
Okay.
Nice.
So we have Sentari Mino with us today. He's the AZ director for Gen Next. He facilitates the engagement of local philanthropists and activates community leaders to drive social change in the valley. Mr. Miner oversaw the corporate and foundation relations and major campaigns for Arizona Humane Society in his past. He started his career with the nonprofit sector at Rodell Foundation, where he managed communication events and special projects under the direction of the president and CEO. He is a Phoenix native, one of the few, and participated in the American Express Leadership Academy. I like that because I'm with American Express.
Love it.
In my past, has a strong expertise in fundraising, communications, and strategic planning. You also have the most interesting name on earth. Why did your parents name you after a nebula?
I do not know. My little brothers are Jason and Dominic, and so I got the very unique name, and they didn't. But it's a question I get asked a lot, and my parents just it's the '80s. They just came up with it, and they loved it. Yeah, it's been great, and it's always a conversation starter, so I love it.
They were listening to 80s music. It sounds like. So essentially, you help people become more effective civic leaders. Does that boil it down?
Yeah. So my career has been really, and one of the things that I've been working with a coach on, but really what I've come to notice is that my can't not do. So the thing that I have to, what really drives me every day is helping people realize what they're passionate about and how to use their talent, their time and talent to really empower them to be successful in that. So, and my time with Gen Next, so I've been the Arizona director for, oh my God, probably like 6 or 7 months now. Yeah. And it really is a network of leaders tackling the greatest generational challenges of our time. So we're looking at how do you keep accomplished leaders in the mindset of being future focused and helping with topics such as education, economic opportunity, and global security, galvanizing people around those topics and then leading them into a way so that they can be effective social and civic citizens to really promote change in those areas. And so my job or my jobs have been in helping people kind of realize their full potential and realize that they have some agency and they have empowerment and they have the means to actually make a change on whatever that might be.
Okay, so these are people who have other day jobs.
Yes. So the folks that I work with, my members, all have very, very busy professional and personal lives. And so they see Gen Next as a way to, one, be really well informed about what's going on both culturally, socially, and politically, and also use Gen Next as the avenue to be deployed in a way that is really meaningful of their time and their means and expertise. And so our folks are super busy. They're all local CEOs, owners, operators who have decided to use this as an avenue to not only give back to the community, but learn more about how they can be engaged and make generational impact. So looking at how do you plant a seed that something that might not grow until 50 years later and be okay with that and really get the tools and the mindset behind, I want to be educated on this, I want to know more about this, and I want to be at the forefront of this, knowing that the change might not happen tomorrow, might not happen in 10 years, but we know in the next generation everything will pay off. And so those are the members of Gen Next.
When you were, what were your major influences that got you into this? How did you actually?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because I like to get into people's personalities. So somewhere along the line, you decided you would rather be in this type of role versus some other path.
I think it was just starting in high school, I was always really involved in community service and really liked that, and it just kind of gelled with me. And then in college, the same thing. And then after college, I was employed by my first 2 jobs were with 4-profit companies, actually, and it just wasn't for me. I was an editor for a publishing firm in Scottsdale that's now defunct, as you might imagine, and I was leading a content team. I was like 22, 23, managing people that were twice my age, and it sucked. It was awful, and it just was. I wasn't passionate about it. It didn't sit right. And then so I was thinking, well, what do I want to do? I really liked volunteering, but is that a career? And then so I did more research, and I was like, oh, wow, you can make a living out of this. And so I looked around, applied some places, then landed at the Rodell Foundation, and that kind of catapulted me through. But it was what kept me going was seeing more and more people in the nonprofit space that were just crazy smart, who said intentionally, I could be doing anything. Like, they could be doing anything they wanted to, but they wanted to be focused on making a direct difference in someone's lives. And I was like, I can get behind that. And so I've been really involved in the nonprofit sector. I've sat on, oh God, more boards than I can count, and chaired 4 boards by the time I was 30. And so now I'm getting into this place where I want to be more intentional with my time. And so I've cut back on my board seats, but I've also been thinking about how I want to help with this next generation. And it really is. I was working with one of my coaches, and I think my thing now is going to be working with college age students to figure out what their next step is. So I remember, like, when I was in college, I did, like, you have this nebulous idea of what careers are. You're like, lawyer, doctor, whatever that might be. I'll go be a PR person. I'll be a journalist.
Indiana Jones. I wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Right, yeah. I remember I wanted to be an actuary at some point, which I don't know why I wanted to be an actuary. And so I think one of my big passions is going to be helping college age students figure out what their passions are and how they're going to align. So similar to what I do adults right now. In my
I don't mean to laugh at actuaries. I'm sorry. I just tried to go from Indiana Jones to what's the movie about an actuary? You know,
there isn't one. No, the accountant is actually about an accountant who could be an actuary. So yeah, there's actually that.
I guess.
But yeah, I think the thing that's kept me going in this is this idea that the nonprofit sector needs and demands good talent, and I want to be the person that brings that good talent to the sector.
Until I met you, I didn't know this type of person existed.
Gotcha.
Maybe I'm out of touch. Maybe there's a lot of folks like you, but how do you get into this, and how do you make a living at it?
Me personally?
Yeah.
So there's, I think more and more people are finding a need to be engaged in their community, whether that's locally, nationally, globally. And so there have to be connectors and conduits to making that happen. And so there are people like me all over the country that their jobs are to really be the person that helps facilitate that change. And when you look at something like corporate social responsibility, so major corporations and how they're deploying their employees, to just local volunteerism, there is someone that's helping organize, curate, do all that work. And that's always been something I've been really drawn to and passionate about, because I love to see everyday folks who are doing great things and being the person that helps them do those great things.
But it must be a lot of business, because you are one of the busiest people I've ever seen. I don't know if it's just your energy level. But.
It's a lot. I think it's if you do it right, it's a lot. And if you are as passionate about it as I am and passionate about it as my members are, it can be an all-consuming job, but that's good. And I luckily have I'm fortunate enough to also have a schedule that allows me to find time to do the things that I'm personally passionate about. And that is I'm busy, but I'm busy in a good way that I wouldn't change for anything.
Make me feel like a blood-sucking capitalist. I always feel like we're doing good stuff, Wayne, and then I meet somebody like him. So, you know.
It's like levels.
Yeah, if you pay us, we'll do it. So one of the things that I got to witness for the first time last year that I think you've been involved in was Fast Pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And I was intrigued because they teach people how to tell their story, and every one of them they go up and they put them on the stage and they've trained them and to tell their story, and then every one of them you just want to throw money at them
right
at the end. What's your involvement with that? How did that come to be?
So I was involved with a firm called Social Venture Partners for a number of years, both as a partner, so a donor, and then I came on staff, and I did that for about 3.5 years. So I'd been involved in Fast Pitch in some capacity for 5 or 6 years. And the idea would be that you find local nonprofits and social enterprises and coach them on 3-minute pitches. And they use those pitches in front of a live audience to gain not only financial resources, but human capital and so on and so forth. So they're not only learning how to articulate their story, but getting something out of the process. And so it was a really cool way to help engage and empower the nonprofit sector here in Phoenix, but it was born out of Social Venture Partners Los Angeles, actually. The folks here saw it and said we should bring that to the Valley, and we did. And it's been a very, very big piece of the nonprofit community here, and it seems like I'm no longer with Social Venture Partners, but I know that they're now pivoted to do this an ed pitch, so like Fast Pitch for education ventures, with the same concept of really finding ventures, giving them the tools that they need to be successful in articulating what they do and why they do it, and then also giving them the audience of folks who might be able to help them do those things.
You said it was 3 minutes.
Yep, 3-minute pitch.
God, I sat there and I watched them, and I felt like I was hearing
It's good coaching is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't even
It's
time them.
great. Yeah. It was great.
And you're in this huge theater, and these people are on stage with a spotlight on them.
Right.
But they act like they've been there before.
So we do a lot of the organization did a lot of coaching, but one of the things that I found working in, well, I won't even say just the nonprofit sector, the social entrepreneurship, any entrepreneur or passionate business owner, I'll put it that way, is that they have this great story. They have all these reasons why they started the business. They have everything, but they don't know how to tell it in a way that is not off-putting or that is actually meaningful to the person that's listening to it. So a lot of my time before this iteration of my professional career has been in helping coach entrepreneurs in any sense of the word on how to effectively tell their story in a way that someone else will want to hear. Because I think when it's close to us, when it's passionate, and when we're passionate about it, we think every detail is pertinent, and that's just not true. So you meet with entrepreneurs and nonprofit leaders who want to tell you every bit of data, every story, every piece of the programming that they do, and it's sitting down with them and saying that's not going to resonate with everyone, so we need to figure out what is going to resonate with this audience that you're going to be in front of. And that is a very valuable tool for them. I think outside of the money that they won in the pitch competition, they also said being able to tell my story in 3 minutes and know what I need to focus on when I sit in front of someone is just immensely valuable.
So, putting you on the spot here, are there guidelines, or is it different for everybody?
I did a pitch session at Phoenix Startup Week last week, and there was a couple of guidelines that I put in place, like one, keep it simple. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that are in my presentation. Keep it simple. Tell a very personal narrative about why did you found this organization? Why is this personally important to you? Throw in some data points that people can actually digest. It's called social math. So one of the things that I always say is that there are, and I'm probably getting the number right now that I don't have the slide in front of me, but there are 87,000 gun stores in the United States. That means for every McDonald's, so picture the local McDonald's near you, there are 3 gun stores around that. So imagine you're a McDonald's, there are 3 times as many gun stores as that. And so that's something that people can picture. And when you say that in a pitch, people are like, wow, I now can think of my McDonald's, and if there were 3 gun stores around, that's a lot of gun stores. And so coaching people on how to find that social math, make it really personal to them. And then I think the big piece is that people, when they pitch, they always forget to ask. So you get through talking to someone for an hour and like, well, what did you want out of that? Like, what was the point of this meeting? Why are you on stage? What does that look like? And so coaching people on a very clear ask, like I would like $50,000 to infuse capital to in my business to do X, or I need a human resources expert because I'm scaling at a rate and that's just not my expertise. So I would like that person to do that and do X.
Something very specific.
Very specific and very tangible so that people can say, oh, I know someone that does that, or I can find $50,000 and I know why you need that, so let's do that. And so you'd be surprised how many people pitch and just don't have an ask at the end of that pitch.
Well, and then the person who gives the money for that feels like they've actually actioned something.
Right, and they acted on something that was very, very necessary for that organization to grow.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm recalling political fundraising, and it was kind of the same thing.
Right.
And it was the same story, but I also wonder how that might translate into the first for-profit world.
Right. No, so I've worked with for-profit entrepreneurs too, and it's the same thing. I mean, once you're an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur, and so there are so many people who are passionate about their startup, their app, whatever that might be, and you're saying, okay, I get the mechanics of this, but why did you get involved in this? Like, why is this your baby? Why is this a thing? And why should I care? That's a big piece of the pitching is like, why should I care about this? Is it going to benefit me? Is it going to benefit society? Will it make something easier for me? And then getting people to really understand, because again, when you're close to it, you're like, everyone should just know this. And it's like, nope. And you got 3 minutes because that's when we know that people will just tune out, turn off. And so I think it's agnostic among sector. It's just like people need to be more thoughtful about how they're articulating what it is that they do or what they're selling or what product they have out there.
So you've heard a lot of pitches for nonprofit ventures,
Yep.
for-profit venture, but let's stick to the nonprofit.
Yep.
When you hear the pitch or you hear the idea, are you able to tell immediately whether it's going to be successful or not?
That's a good question. I think I can, yes and no. I think I look more to, one, if it's an idea that's already out there. There's so many things, especially in the Valley nonprofit sector, but I would say nationally that are so duplicative, and there's so many iterations of organizations that already exist. So you see someone pitch and you're like, well, that already exists, and there's someone that's doing it well, so you should partner with them or become a program of them or see how there can be some synergies, because it doesn't make sense for you to try to find all this capital for something that's already on the ground, right? And sure, there's competition's great, and you should have that. But if there are 50 domestic violence shelters in Phoenix, that just doesn't make any sense. And the fact that you're pitching another one is not a good use of my time or money, and it's not a good use of your time or money. And so that I can easily suss out. I think the biggest thing is the person. So having and this goes to what you guys already know, having the right leader in the seat is probably the number one indicator for me on whether or not that venture will be successful. Because if you have a dynamic person that's hungry, that's smart, that can get it, they can make anything work. Like, they will figure it out. And so seeing that piece of it, I think I can have a good job of saying that person will make it, or that person will, at least, I won't even say make it. They will understand the right questions to ask and have the right people to have around them to get them in a place that they will be successful, whether that is scaling up their venture or figuring out how to be a part of another venture.
All right, so that just leads us into the obvious question. What makes a good leader for a nonprofit?
Ooh, for a nonprofit, man, that is above my pay grade. But I think what I would say is someone that's intellectually curious, willing to ask questions, willing to realize, just like any great leader, that you have to surround yourself with really good people who will be the experts that you're not. Be really vulnerable and know your weaknesses. Be willing to be open to other sectors. I think nonprofits get in this mindset of like, for-profit organizations or people from for-profits have no idea what we do, so they cannot be helpful to me, and that's just not true. Everyone can be helpful to everyone. Everyone has something to offer. And so I've sat on boards before where it's been nonprofit specific, and they're like, well, why would we want someone corporate on this board of directors? And it's like, well, of course you want someone corporate on this. They, one, bring more money than any of you have, and two, they have a mindset that will help us think outside the box, and that's what you need to innovate and to move and to grow. So I think nonprofit leaders have to be thoughtful of that. And then also, I think one of the biggest things is to be, I would actually say this about any leader, but in the nonprofit sector, get into this mindset of being bigger than the sector. So outside of the nonprofit sector, there are so many other things. So be mindful of like what's happening outside the world, or in the world outside of what you already do. Because I think the nonprofit sector is so insular and so focused on what they're doing that a lot of things like fly over the radar. They're just not thoughtful about it.
So everything you described there, I would have given the same answer for a leader of any kind.
Of any kind, right.
Although there's very few of them really in the world. When you get out there, there's very few people who fit that story.
It's hard to be that, yeah. For anyone to be that.
But what makes, is there a difference between being a leader in the
for-profit and nonprofit sector?
Yeah.
I wish there was, and I actually know, and what we did a lot, or what I've coached people a lot, is that when you think of nonprofits, actually a detriment is for them to think that there is a difference. So they see their organizations and they're like, we're nonprofit, so we don't need to think like a business, and you absolutely should. The nonprofits is a tax status. You need to make money. You need to make money to make sure that you further your mission. And so when you get people in that mindset of we're a nonprofit, so we can only do so much, and we can only do these things, it's like, no. You think like any other entrepreneur does. It's just a different way of raising capital, but it's still, you're bringing in revenue. You're doing the best you can with that revenue. You're going to use that revenue to further your mission. So I think people would like to think that there's a difference between a for-profit and nonprofit leader, but no. At the end of the day, you're running an organization. You're trying to bring in revenue. You're trying to grow an organization. And I think the only difference would be like your thoughts on what is considered your bottom line. So a lot of nonprofits, like their bottom line is really the social impact, whereas a for-profit is shareholders and dollars. But at the end of the day, it's still your bottom line. So I think that a nonprofit leader and a for-profit leader can easily, if they're open-minded, cross between worlds. And people do. A lot of people do. People run businesses and they go be a nonprofit executive and they go back to being a business. There are plenty of examples where that's been successful.
Well, how about when it's failed?
Ooh, when it's failed.
What?
When it's failed is like one, again, going back to what I've been touting, is someone thinking that their way of doing it is the only way of doing it. So a business person going into a nonprofit and saying, well, we don't need to fundraise, we need to figure out a revenue, an earned revenue stream. There's an organization in the Valley that just went through this, where they brought in a CEO of from a for-profit company to run a nonprofit, and it was like, we're not fundraising, we're going to find a revenue stream. And then, so he completely stopped fundraising, which was like something they've been really good at and doing and bringing in revenue. And
He just cut it off
It's cut it off
completely.
completely. Not cut it off completely, but just was very negligent with it. And they
Okay.
hemorrhaged money. And then the other solution that he was going for didn't quite get off the ground. And they were like, well, we don't have revenue.
Yeah.
And so he went in completely thinking like his way was the way. And that's one recent example that I can think of. So it was, again, someone not being open-minded or thoughtful about what is actually best for the organization, what can I bring to it, but rather they went to the situation saying, this is how it's going to be based on what I know.
Tell us a little bit more about what you do now.
Okay,
In your
yeah.
current organization.
My current organization, so it really is, Gen Next is an organization, it's invitation only, that helps galvanize leaders around those three issues that we talked about: education, economic opportunity, and global security. And those are really the three levers that we feel kind of determine a prosperous society. And we have folks who come together and, from a tactical standpoint, bring them together for monthly programming. So that's a speaker, that's a conversation. There's something there to bring these local leaders together to talk about these things or to learn something about how to be better civic stewards, as we talked about earlier, in those three areas. And then we do, again, there's curated content, monthly speakers. We'll do some facilitated conversations on different topics on education, workforce development, whatever it might be, whatever is topical at that time. And then we also have a PAC, so we deploy dollars to candidates and certain policies that are aligned with our views. And again, it's nonpartisan, so we provide dollars to folks on both sides. And then we also have a foundation that supports ventures in those three things. And so we are an organization of about 300 members, about 325 members currently around the country. We're in Phoenix, we're in Orange County, we're in Los Angeles, we're in San Diego, Seattle, and New York, and expanding into San Francisco and Dallas. This year I'm actually helping oversee the Dallas expansion. And so it's getting more people who are accomplished, who are intellectually curious, who are focused on those future-focused generational impact ideas, to come together and have an impact in being together in the same room and being informed and being galvanized and being passionate and really moving forward by using their time, talent, and expertise to build up this movement of folks that are saying, all right, these are the things that are going to affect us 50 years from now. What are we going to do about it? And so I have the privilege of overseeing all the members in Arizona and then now Dallas as well.
So you said invitation only.
Yeah.
How does somebody receive an invitation?
How does someone receive an invitation? Well, they'd, one, learn more about the organization, and then they would meet with me, and then we'll go through the vetting process, which is really just meeting. It's a great conversation of me getting to know them getting to know us, getting to see if they're mission aligned and if they would be a great fit there's a lot of criteria on that, and then getting them connected with some members, having the members meet with them, and then we'd go from there.
You want them to bring particular skills? So, for example, if somebody's a great operational person or a process person, or somebody's a...
I think we just want to, I think we just want to bring a good group of folks together that really care about the future. So whatever their backgrounds professionally might be, and all of our folks are usually like C-level owners, operators, or senior VP level. But that is not to say if you're a good person that is accomplished in your own right, that has an interest in being a part of this movement, that you wouldn't be a considered a person for Gen Next membership.
I've been lucky enough to go to a couple of nonprofit. We actually do some very good nonprofit work here. We go and work on assembly lines. I was actually just visiting one last week that has a warehouse that reminds me of an Amazon warehouse, and so I see that all the things that affect for-profit businesses and process improvement in Wayne's area and things like that are the same in that sense. They might be on a different level sometimes because they don't necessarily afford all the technology and so forth.
Right.
But if we look at because we're about transformation here, if we look at what's changing for profit, not profit, what do you see as the big factors that are starting to impact, and maybe the global macro factors that are changing
That's a good question. I could talk about this for hours, but
that's good. We've got time.
I think, because I've been on the nonprofit side and the foundation giving side, and one of the big changes that the philanthropic sector is going through is hopefully touting this idea of unrestricted or capacity building gifts. And what I mean by that is like getting capital for your organization that has no strings attached. It's just we need to use that for whatever we want to use it for. So traditionally,
I'd like that.
right. So traditionally, nonprofits get dollars, and people say, "I want it to go to programming." So I want it to go directly to the books for kids, or I want it to go to whatever that might be. And nonprofits are saying that's all well and good. We have enough money for that. What I need money for is a new staff position in fundraising, or I need new laptops for my staff, or they need iPhones, or whatever that might be. And there's been this mindset. And there's a great TED Talk from Dan Pallotta about it's called Uncharitable, and it's this weird notion that we expect nonprofits to do this work without actually having any money. So we say I'll give you $1, but make sure that 90% of that dollar goes to programming. And you're saying, well, how do I run it? You couldn't run a business if 90% of your dollars went directly to just the product development. You can't do that. You need infrastructure. You need people. You need a space. And so the transformation is more and more funders saying, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, if you want to be successful, I actually have to pay you if you want someone that's good, you have to pay them a good wage. And they're probably going to want a laptop. And you know what? They probably want mileage reimbursement. And those aren't bad things, but we've gotten to this place where we feel like charities and nonprofits should just like figure it out. Like, you're doing God's work, you're doing good, so you shouldn't want these things. And that's more and more people are saying, no, I want these things. And if you actually want us to be successful, if you want us to see more kids, if you want us to be better at what we do, we need dollars to do that. So a big transformation right now is more and more funders saying, all right, I get that. I'm willing to put dollars towards those things that you need in infrastructure and capacity building and IT and process improvement. Like, think about if you went to a large nonprofit and everything was gone awry, and you knew that you had someone that could do the process improvement, but they're like, we don't have the money for that. And so you could go to a funder and tell them this would help us help more kids, and they'd be like, well, we just want to help the kids. We don't want to pay for that to happen. And so you're saying there's a disconnect. Now funders are seeing that disconnect and saying, all right, I will pay for that process person. And so that's been a big change, although it's a slow change because most funders are in this very antiquated mindset that dollars should be spent the way that they've always been spent. So I think that's one big transformation. And I think another thing is on the nonprofit side, getting out of that nonprofit mindset. So I'm of the camp, if you want a good director, if you want a good ED, if you want a good CEO in the nonprofit sector, you need to pay them as if they're in the for-profit sector. Like, my skills have not changed because now I'm doing good. You should pay someone for those skills. And so nonprofits have traditionally been like, well, we can't pay you as much because we're doing good work. It's like, no, you should pay me just as much because we're doing good work. And getting them in that mindset has been a big transformational shift. And I think the more and more people my age, millennials, that ascend into these higher roles, that will become more of the norm of people saying, like, I want to be compensated.
You want smart people.
Yeah, you want smart people to do the work.
Plus, there are downsides to going to a nonprofit. For example, there's no ownership.
Right.
Yeah,
There's
there's no bonus structure beyond this performance bonus.
Right.
There's nothing that has this long-term view.
There's no, right, you're right. It's very hard to justify the sacrifice. And it's not just like a small sacrifice. There are some nonprofits, like, they're paying master's level people $44,000 a year. Like, that doesn't work. And they're saying, well, you should do this because you care about the mission. It's like, yeah, to some degree, but I also have to pay my bills. And if you want someone to do this very well and be the most effective for the kids that we're serving, you probably want the smartest person because they're doing the work, they're doing the good work, and so you have to pay them accordingly. And so now people are seeing that, and there's a transformation in that. And I also think in the sector, it's really interesting to see the shift from traditional nonprofits to this idea of benefit corporations or social enterprises. So now doing good in the world is not just charities or 501c3s. It's like I can start a for-profit business right now and have an arm of it that's tied to social impact. And more people are seeing the validity behind that. And some actually would argue that that's probably the best way to do it. It's having like a Coca-Cola have these big initiatives because they have the dollars, they have the people to do it, and then funnel their ideas and brain trust behind that. And so more and more for-profits are getting into the social space, and that's been really, really fascinating to see and really good.
Well, tell me a little bit about the American Express Leadership Academy.
Yeah, so American Express, in case you all didn't know, is their one main philanthropic pillar is leadership. So they give so much money to developing leaders in both the for-profit and nonprofit space. And so at Arizona State University, their nonprofit leadership program, it's a 9-month intensive program, selective, about 25 folks from the Valley are picked each cohort. So I was in cohort 4, funded by American Express, and it's really It's 9 months of, you learn about just leadership principles, but also very tangible things like marketing, PR, I'm trying to think, finance, budgeting, things like that. And so you have that 9-month program, and then you graduate. And then American Express actually tracks you throughout that. So there are other professional development opportunities provided by them once you're an alum of one of their programs. And so they have so many different professional development and leadership programs. And it's been really interesting to see that that's their pillar. It makes sense because you want really good people to be developed and trained so they can, have an American Express and spend money. And it's that they
Get
do
that platinum card,
right? Yeah,
folks.
get that platinum card. And they've done a really, really good job at cultivating leaders through those programs. It was a phenomenal experience.
Now, the reason I like that connection is I did work for American Express for 9 years. I loved the fact that they did have this whole philanthropic arm. What was interesting, though, and this is a question I have about kind of all organizations like this that want to do good, is it recommended that they focus on something? Or American Express did lots of things. It didn't matter where you were. They had all kinds of things going on. But it always seemed to me that if we focused our attention on one thing or a couple things, we could really drive a change. Is it better for an organization to kind of spread itself out, or is it better for it to focus?
From a nonprofit standpoint?
Yeah.
I think because nonprofits are naturally so lean, because they're focusing mostly on philanthropic dollars, my advice, and someone could, knock this, so it's just my take on it, would be to have a really focused niche. I think once organizations get too big and too wide, there's something called mission creep, where you're questioning, is this our core mission? Like if you're a dental clinic that starts doing like outreach to the homeless, it's like, is that what we're started to do, and is that what we want to do? Or if you work with refugees and now you're working with, and then now you're starting to do programming with domestic violence victims, like that's a mission. I mean, sure, that's great work, but that's probably not what you're supposed to do, and that's not what you're equipped to do. So nonprofits especially should probably be focused on what their niche is, and then as they grow and scale, yes, bring on more programming that's mission aligned. So I think get as big as you want as long as it's mission aligned, and then but I do think it's easier to sell, or it's easier to fundraise, at least for I've seen, for something that's a specific ask in a specific population. So when you're doing work with refugees, it's like, your dollars are going directly to this population, whereas if that were just an entity of one piece of the organization, then it'd be harder to sell.
I think even if you're a corporation and you're trying to do this, your purpose as an organization, that's one of the things we talk about in terms of becoming a more responsive organization, responding to execute, is really figure out what your purpose is as an organization.
Right.
I think aligning your philanthropic purpose with your purpose just helps that motivation along, and your employees, that keeps your mission centered, keeps everything centered. That way there's a university here that focuses on not just building their university and not for-profit university, but they focus on building the community around them, because it does two things. One, it makes the community around them more successful so that they can then get students who are going to be more successful, but it also aligns their people behind building that community, right? So it has a circle to it. I really like that, and I just think when I've been in organizations that just spread themselves too thin, I don't know, but you can tell me if that's right.
No, I think, and you made a good point about organizations using the philanthropic. I did a great and fun presentation to the Arizona Bar Association about 2 years ago on intergenerational workplaces. But a big piece of it was, as you see organizations evolve and as you see the workplace evolve, with younger folks being now pulled into or ascending into leadership positions, more and more organizations are going to have to be purpose-driven, and more people are going to seek out things that are purpose-driven. So when you look at people my age that are looking for work, they're aligning themselves with organizations that are doing good in the world.
By the way, he's 83.
I'm 83, yeah. 32, actually. They're aligning themselves with organizations that are doing good in the world. So more and more corporations are going to have to be thoughtful about how are they aligning themselves socially and how are they making an impact, because their employees will care about that. Not only care about it, they'll demand that it's part of their thing. And so one of the things we talked about with the Bar Association is that more and more lawyers are using a very specific industry are saying, I want to be able to use part of my day to give pro bono hours to nonprofits. And if you don't do that, I will find a firm that will. And so more and more firms are saying, all right, we have to give our associates X amount of hours they can use a year to just do whatever they want with them as long as it's aligned to an organization that they love. And I think that is something that corporations are going to have to be mindful of. And that's just a good thing because your employees are now engaged. You look good in the community. The community is getting something out of it. It's a triple win. And so it's going to be interesting to see how corporations transform themselves into that.
We do a lot of studies on things like automation, Internet of Things, blockchains. Do these things come to play here, or is it more basic than that?
That's a good question. As we do work in Gen Next, one of the things that we talk about is education or economic opportunity, and definitely those things do. So when you think about the global community, artificial intelligence, AI, and these new ways of financing and currency are only going to make our lives even more interesting. And you think about workplace development. We had a great dinner where we talked about what is going to be the next step in like education, right? And it's going to be, what do you do when 50% of the workforce is no longer needed? So with automation, there might be like the 2 out of 3 of us in this room there might not be a job for us. Like our skill sets aren't there. Something else took it over.
That's you and me, Wayne.
I think so.
I mean, I was hoping you guys would understand that. But so you might just have this large swath of people that are no longer needed or their skill sets aren't needed. So what does that look like? And that means that there might be a universal basic income, right? And so those are definitely things that people, at least in my circles, and I think from a nonprofit standpoint, they're definitely going to have to figure out, well, what does that look like from a social impact standpoint where 50% of the people in this country are no longer working, and what does that mean for how that might impact folks. So I think people are having very nascent conversations on that, but nothing too widespread yet, but it's something that should be in everyone's mind, and I mean everyone, because the more I read about artificial intelligence, the more I learn about what's happening in the global community. No one is safe from automation. Like lawyers will always say, well, you'll always need a lawyer, and then I was reading articles that say, no, that's not true. There's now AI that can give they can try a case way better than any human can because they've known every case that's ever gone through that's similar.
If you want to read an article about that, you can go to mssbti.com. We have that exactly.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. And I will go on and read that because no one's safe. And so when you have that mindset, you have to think about, well, how will I personally pivot, and then how will we as a country and as a civilization pivot when maybe 50% of the people just will not have a job. And with that, 50% of the people, because so much of our well-beings and our livelihoods are tied to our profession. If you have 50% of people that don't have a thing to do every day, what does that look like? I think that's the bigger question of like so many people, their identities are their jobs. If you don't have a job anymore, what do you do? If you've been a lawyer for 50 years and you're no longer a lawyer, what does your everyday look like? How can you be you have no idea how to be a productive citizen.
Yeah, I mean, we had this talk on our previous podcast, and I had a disagreement with the fellow, but I actually think of automation as being a way of freeing you up. So it's taking care of the tasks that you otherwise would have to do, but it frees up and allows you to use your brain power, your creativity to do the next thing. It's sort of like in an automated, if you're driving in a self-driving car, you can read a book.
Right.
You don't have to you can take a class while you're doing it, but you're still getting from place to place. But you're right, people are going to have to adapt and say, how do I live in that world? And I do see some great, like in blockchain, for example, I see some great opportunities in fundraising because you can do these transactions from anywhere in the world with people and do them instantaneously.
Right.
You don't need all these. You don't need intermediaries. There's.
And blockchain it's so interesting because it's so new, but there's, for instance, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation accepts that as a currency. It makes sense because they're in Silicon Valley. But I do think, to your point, there will be more options for. And maybe I'm not sure. I'm still on the fence about how big blockchain will be, but I don't think it'll go away. This idea won't go away.
Well, there's Bitcoin, and then there's the technology behind the blockchain.
Yeah. So, how that manifests itself going forward, I think will be something that will definitely. It is something that's going to be part of our landscape. I just don't know to what degree. And then, yes, definitely nonprofits, and then especially foundations who get their dollars from big donors are going to have to be accepting and open to that currency.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting times.
It will be interesting times.
before I met you, I met a lot of people who knew you,
Right.
and they kept talking. You got to meet Sentari. You mentioned board, so we've been talking about leadership. We're talking about management in that sense, but let's talk a little bit about board. So if I wanted to be on a board and I wanted to pick a thing and get on the board and be a
Right.
part of it, there's a little bit of a prestige thing that comes with that, but then there's the good feelings that come with that. What kind of people do you want to have on a board? What kind of skills? What should somebody bring to be considered to be on a board?
Big question, but I think I would say bring passion, bring expertise, and bring an open mind into helping the nonprofit CEO. Find out what my advice to people is always find out what you're passionate about. So if it's kids, it's animals, it's education, if it's an environment, then find organizations that are doing great work in that, and then just meet with their executive director and say, hey, I might be interested in joining your board of directors, and they'll go run you through whatever process they have. Every organization is different. Some is a long vetting process, some is short. It just depends on the organization. And then as you're sitting in that seat, be open-minded to knowing that if you're a for-profit person, that nonprofits don't necessarily operate the same ways for-profits do, so keep that in mind. But be open to willing to lend your expertise, and then know that your job really is to be an advocate for that organization, be a champion, to be a steward, to give, personally give dollars, and then find other dollars to give, because the main source of income for most nonprofits is philanthropic gifts. And I think it's something that everyone should do. I've loved my board experience. I think it's taught me a ton about patience and conflict management, and when to really lean in and when to just say this is not my fight. I will not add anything or value to this conversation. And that's actually helped me in my professional and personal life. So I think if you have an interest in joining a board, please do so.
Okay, so I have a question that may be a little bit controversial.
Okay.
Okay. So I was, for a while, involved in some consulting for nonprofits, doing feasibility stuff in Seattle.
Okay.
Okay. And when you got involved with that, you started to realize there's a different mindset behind the nonprofits, but more in a different way than just the difference between profit and nonprofit. It was almost as if you started to raise questions, and I came at things from a conservative point of view. Mm-hmm. And so if I started to raise questions about things, running it as a business, or what the purpose of it is, and who's it serving, all these type of things, I got this sense that you were sometimes pushed aside or even looked away. Do I have the right feeling there, or was I
don't
being a
know
little
if I
paranoid?
can't speak to your feeling, but I think if that's the feeling that you got, I don't believe that any organization every organization should feel comfortable answering every question you just asked. Yeah. And they should be very competent in those answers, and they shouldn't push anyone aside, because those are very mission critical questions that they should be answering.
But it's not just for bleeding hearts, right? Being involved in nonprofits should be for everybody.
Yeah, I don't think.
And there's not this this is the conservative
I
causes
think,
and these are the liberal causes.
There's a lot of people that believe that you have to be like super social justice to be involved in. No, it's like if you care about people, you should be involved in a nonprofit. Like you should should have a seat at the table. I think there's a spectrum of interest in anything. Like for instance, my thing isn't like, it's not animals. I work for an animal welfare organization, but that's not really my passion. But I still will support friends that do that work. Like I'm happy to give because you like it, but that's not my thing. In the same way that people who really like animals are like, kids aren't my thing, but I get why we're doing that, so I can support it. So you don't have to be a full-on passionate person to be involved in these organizations. So anyone that says that I don't want their money because they're not fully bought in or fully passionate about our mission, I'd say you just left some money on the table, because that's not the point. The point is to serve the people that you're serving.
I think part of that might be, as you were talking about, the evolution, too, of the different people that are going into nonprofits now. Right? I mean, historically, there's been a certain type of person that went into nonprofits.
I totally agree with you.
And they weren't always open to the other, right? They were very narrowly focused on just their one thing. And I think as these progress and you get more business people, right? More people that flow back and forth between the nonprofit and the more-profit, more of these for-profit companies that see a philanthropic role and a societal role in their organizations. I think you'll see that starting to change, because they understand they do have to embrace all views.
And they have to be efficient.
And they have to be efficient.
They have to run an operation.
You made a great point, and I think that's professionalizing the profession. So I think you made a great point in that 20 years ago, nonprofits was like, there was definitely a certain type of person that did it, but now it's people see a nonprofit career as a legitimate, I mean, there are now degree programs for nonprofit studies, right? And so now you have this huge swath of people that otherwise might not have thought about it as something they want to get into. And with that brings this whole new mindset of like, we have to think about this as a nonprofit is like so many people that I've talked to recently are saying like nonprofits, it's just simply a tax status. Like, that's it. But you're a nonprofit because that is an IRS designation, but you need to make money. At the end of the day, your job is to make money so that you can serve the people that you do. And more people who are getting in the profession are saying, oh, right, that's what we do. Like, we're doing this mission critical work, but I have to operate and run like a business. I have to be efficient. I have to hire the right people. I have to have the right technology, infrastructure, et cetera, because that's what's actually going to make sure that there are less puppies on the side of the road or less kids in homeless shelters or whatever it is that these people do. And that's, I think that goes more and more to the idea of this sector is now, to your point, transformed into something that's being much more professional than it had been ever before.
Where can people find you other than creeping around the Henry on Camelback? If you want to find Sentari, if you can't get a hold of him, you go down to the Henry and you have a coffee, and he will walk by you. But other than that, how do they find you?
The best way to do that is just to go to CentariMinor.com. That has a lot of the information we talked about here and has links to pretty much everything that we talked about. So a good repository would be CentariMinor.com.
Okay.
Perfect.
And that's not a consolation. So, all right.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you.
This is so fun.
You've been great.